Ethan Cole had not planned to be late. He never did. Planning was all he had left. As a single father, mornings were a delicate balance of alarms, packed lunches, mismatched socks, and whispered encouragements to a little boy who still missed his mother in ways he couldn't put into words. Ethan's wife had passed away 3 years earlier after a sudden illness, leaving behind a grief so heavy it changed the way time moved in their home. Since then, Ethan had learned to live on coffee, determination, and the quiet promise he made every night to his sleeping son that tomorrow would be better. That morning, however, tomorrow had arrived with rain, traffic, and a car blocking his exit. The parking lot outside the small apartment complex was cramped and poorly managed, a patchwork of faded lines and unspoken rules. Ethan had parked carefully the night before, knowing he would need a clean exit in the morning. But now, another car sat directly behind him, so close he couldn't even turn the wheel. His son, Noah, sat in the back seat, clutching his backpack, eyes darting between his father's tense face and the rain-streaked window. Ethan felt the familiar panic rise in his chest. Being late meant risking his job, and his job meant survival. He had worked too hard, climbed too far, to let everything unravel because of one careless stranger. The woman who owned the blocking car emerged from the building moments later, heels clicking sharply against wet concrete, her phone pressed to her ear, her expression tight with irritation. She was dressed in a tailored coat, hair perfectly styled, carrying herself with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. Her name was Claire Whitman, and she was already running late for a meeting she believed would finally prove her worth at work. She had no patience left for obstacles, especially not a man waving desperately from an old sedan. What followed was not a screaming match or dramatic confrontation, but something far more cutting. Claire dismissed Ethan's urgency with cold indifference, convinced that his problem was not hers to solve. In her mind, she was important, overworked, and entitled to every inch of space she occupied. Ethan tried to remain calm, but the weight of his situation pressed down on him like a physical force. His voice shook as he gestured toward his son, toward the clock on the dashboard, toward a life that did not have room for delays. Claire eventually moved her car, but not before delivering a final look of disdain that lingered far longer than the rain. As she drove off, she never looked back. Ethan pulled out quickly, heart pounding, guilt washing over him for letting his son witness yet another moment of adult frustration. Noah said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. Ethan promised himself, again, that one day things would be easier. What neither of them knew was that fate had already woven their paths together in a far more complicated way. Ethan dropped Noah off at school just in time, watching his son disappear through the doors before allowing himself a long, shaky breath. He wiped his face, straightened his jacket, and headed toward his office. To the outside world, Ethan Cole was composed, professional, and quietly authoritative. Few people knew about the sleepless nights, the therapy sessions, the moments spent staring at old photos when the house was too quiet. Even fewer knew that he was the founder and CEO of one of the fastest-growing consulting firms in the city, a man who had built success from loss, driven by the need to provide and the desire to honor the life he once shared. Claire arrived at the office flustered and irritated, still replaying the morning encounter in her head. To her, the man in the car was just another example of the chaos she felt. Surrounded by. She had been with the company for 2 years, constantly pushing, constantly proving, terrified that one misstep would confirm her deepest fear that she didn't truly belong. Today's meeting mattered more than she could admit. It was a chance to present her ideas directly to the leadership team, a chance to finally be seen. The conference room filled slowly, the air thick with anticipation. When Ethan walked in, the room fell silent. Claire felt the shift before she understood it, the subtle change in energy that comes when real authority enters a space. She looked up, her breath catching painfully in her chest as recognition hit her like a wave. The tired eyes, the familiar posture. The man from the parking lot was standing at the head of the table, calm, composed, unmistakably in charge. Time seemed to stretch cruelly as realization settled in. Claire felt her face burn, her earlier confidence evaporating into a cold, sinking dread. She replayed her behavior again and again, each moment sharper than the last. She had blocked her boss's car. She had dismissed him. Worse, she had done it in front of his child. The meeting began, and Ethan spoke with quiet authority, outlining goals, challenges, and expectations. He did not look at Claire. Not once. That silence was heavier than anger. Claire struggled to focus, her presentation faltering under the weight of her own shame. For the first time since joining the company, she saw herself clearly, not as the hard-working professional she believed she was, but as someone who had let stress strip away her empathy. Over the following weeks, something changed. Claire found herself watching Ethan more closely, noticing the way he left early some days and arrived late on others, the way he kept a framed drawing on his desk, the way his voice softened when he spoke about work-life balance. She learned, quietly, about his son, about his loss, about the man behind the title. Guilt became a constant companion, but so did a growing determination to be better. Ethan, for his part, did not seek revenge or validation. He carried that morning with him as a reminder, not of Claire's failure, but of how easily people hurt each other without knowing the full story. He had built his company on the belief that leadership meant compassion, not fear. Slowly, deliberately, he began to give Claire opportunities, not as punishment but as a test of character. Claire rose to the challenge. She worked harder than ever, not out of fear, but out of a genuine desire to grow. She volunteered for difficult projects, mentored new hires, and made a conscious effort to lead with kindness. One afternoon, she saw Ethan in the lobby with Noah, who was holding a small, handmade card. Something in her chest tightened. She realized that real strength was not about control or success, but about humility. Months later, during a company-wide meeting, Ethan spoke openly about respect, about the unseen battles everyone carries. He didn't mention the parking lot or the morning rain, but Claire knew the words were for her as much as anyone else. When he recognized her contributions publicly, the applause felt like forgiveness, not just from him, but from herself. The final turning point came quietly. A stormy evening, a late meeting, and a chance encounter in the parking lot again. This time, Claire noticed a car struggling to maneuver out of a tight space. Without hesitation, she stopped, stepped out into the rain, and helped guide it safely through. The driver smiled with relief, and Claire felt something settle inside her. Growth, she realized, was measured in moments like this. Just before this story reaches its end, take a moment to comment below with one word that describes how this story made you feel. Your words matter, and they help others find stories that heal and inspire.